Michael Lawson sat in his pickup truck, gripping the steering wheel with knuckles gone white from pressure. He wasn't sure what was eating at him, but something didn't feel right. The thought had been gnawing at him for weeks, a strange suspicion he couldn't quite place. His wife, Rachel, had been acting differently, distant, preoccupied. She smiled less, avoided his eyes more, and seemed constantly tethered to her phone. Michael shook his head, chastising himself. "You're being paranoid," he muttered, his breath fogging up the windshield in the cool autumn air. Rachel was the love of his life. They'd been married for 12 years and had built a family that centered around their 10-year-old son, Noah. Rachel was kind, generous, and an incredible mother. There was no way she'd betray him. Still, that nagging feeling persisted. He turned off the truck and walked up the driveway to their modest, two-story home in Brookdale. Inside, the warmth of the house greeted him, along with the faint smell of lasagna baking in the oven. Noah was at the dining table, furiously working on his math homework. "Hey, buddy," Michael said, ruffling his son's hair. "Hey, Dad." Noah grinned. "Mom's making lasagna. She said you'd like that." Michael smiled faintly. "Sounds great." He hung up his coat and stepped into the kitchen, where Rachel stood at the counter, chopping fresh basil. She glanced over her shoulder when she heard him, her smile warm but quick, like it was forced. "Hey, honey. Long day?" "Yeah, long," Michael replied. "How about you? Everything okay?" Rachel's hands paused for a fraction of a second before she resumed chopping. "Busy, as usual. You know how it is at school. Kids are wild this time of year, and the PDA's been breathing down my neck about the winter fundraiser." Michael nodded, leaning against the doorframe. He wanted to believe her, but there was something in her voice that didn't sit right, an edge, a subtle nervousness. He brushed it off, forcing himself to relax. "You're amazing," he said, trying to soften his tone. "Don't let them push you too hard." Rachel laughed lightly, the sound ringing hollow in his ears. Later that evening, after Noah had gone to bed, Michael sat in the living room flipping through channels, but his mind wasn't on the TV. He glanced over at Rachel, who was curled up on the couch, her face lit by the soft glow of her phone screen. She giggled at something, her fingers moving quickly to type a reply. "Funny meme?" Michael asked, trying to sound casual. Rachel glanced up, startled, and then gave him a quick smile. "Oh, yeah. Just Emily. She sent me this ridiculous video of her cat." Michael nodded, but his stomach twisted. Emily, Rachel's best friend, was funny, sure, but Rachel's reaction seemed off, too flustered for something so mundane. "You've been texting her a lot lately," Michael said, keeping his tone light. Rachel shrugged. "She's going through a rough patch. Just trying to be there for her." Michael didn't press further, but the moment stayed with him. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he couldn't help but wonder. Was it Emily? Or was there someone else? The following Saturday, Michael decided to tackle the clutter in the garage. Rachel had been after him for weeks to organize the tools, camping gear, and random odds and ends that had piled up. It was a task he hated, but today it felt like a good distraction from the storm brewing in his mind. As he sifted through a box of old receipts and paperwork, something caught his eye, a folded napkin with a handwritten note. It was wedged between a stack of old magazines. The note read, "Last night was unforgettable. Can't wait to see you again. D." Michael's blood ran cold. He turned the napkin over in his hands, searching for more context, but there was nothing else written. His pulse thundered in his ears as he stared at the elegant handwriting. "D?" he whispered to himself. He thought back to the staff at Noah's school. Was there a teacher or coworker Rachel was close to whose name started with D? His mind immediately landed on Daniel Carter, Noah's science teacher. Young, confident, charming, Daniel had joined the school last year, and Michael had seen how the PTA mothers fawned over him. But it was ridiculous, wasn't it? Rachel wouldn't jeopardize their family for something so reckless. Michael shoved the napkin into his pocket, telling himself it was meaningless. But as the hours passed, he couldn't stop thinking about it. That evening, as they sat down to dinner, Michael decided to test the waters. "So, how's everything at school?" Rachel looked up, surprised by the question. "Same as usual. Busy, but good." "Why?" "Just curious," Michael said, keeping his tone neutral. "You ever work with Daniel Carter? Noah's science teacher?" Rachel blinked, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth. Sometimes. He's been helping me with some ideas for the winter fundraiser." "Why?" Michael shrugged, forcing a casual smile. "No reason. Just heard Noah talking about him. Seems like a popular guy." Rachel smiled faintly. "He's nice. The kids love him." Michael nodded, but he couldn't ignore the hesitation in her voice. It was slight, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to keep the doubt festering in his mind. Michael couldn't let the napkin go. It stayed with him like an itch he couldn't scratch, and the small moment of hesitation in Rachel's voice replayed over and over in his mind. He told himself he was being paranoid, that he was blowing things out of proportion. But the rational part of him couldn't silence the gut feeling that something was off. The following week, Michael's unease only grew. Rachel's late nights at school became more frequent, her laughter over texts more guarded. He started paying closer attention, watching her in ways he never had before. It wasn't mistrust, not at first, it was curiosity, a need to understand what was happening in his own home. One Tuesday evening, Rachel announced she'd be working late for a PTA meeting. "It's running until 8:30, so don't wait up," she said, grabbing her bag and pressing a quick kiss to Michael's cheek. Michael forced a smile. "Sure thing. Good luck." As soon as she left, Michael's mind raced. If she really was at school, there'd be no harm in checking. If she wasn't. Michael grabbed his coat and slipped out the door. His truck's engine rumbled softly as he drove toward the middle school, taking care to keep his distance. When he arrived, he parked across the street, killing the engine and watching the building. The parking lot was mostly empty, save for a handful of cars. Rachel's wasn't one of them. Michael frowned, his heart sinking. Maybe she parked somewhere else? He waited, his eyes scanning the lot for any sign of her. 10 minutes passed. 20. Finally, he saw her. Rachel stepped out of a car he didn't recognize, a sleek black sedan parked at the edge of the lot. She was laughing, her head tilted back as she leaned on the door. Michael's stomach turned as he saw the man beside her, Daniel Carter. Daniel said something, and Rachel playfully swatted his arm, her smile wide and easy. She glanced around, as if checking the lot, then leaned in, her hand brushing Daniel's shoulder. Michael's chest tightened. He didn't need to see more. He started the truck and drove away, his hands gripping the wheels so tightly they hurt. That night, Michael lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He felt numb, the image of Rachel and Daniel burned into his mind. He told himself there had to be an explanation. Maybe it was innocent, two coworkers chatting after a meeting. But deep down, he knew better. The next day, Michael took the morning off from work and started digging. He scoured Rachel's social media accounts, looking for anything unusual. Her posts were sparse, pictures of Noah, updates about the fundraiser, but when he checked her tagged photos, something caught his eye. It was a group photo from 2 weeks ago, taken at a school function. Rachel was standing beside Daniel, her body angled toward him. They weren't touching, but the familiarity between them was undeniable. Michael's chest tightened. He knew he needed more proof, something concrete. He decided to check her email. That evening, while Rachel showered, Michael opened her laptop. His hands shook as he typed in her password, an old inside joke between them that now felt like a cruel reminder of what they'd shared. Her inbox was filled with the usual clutter: work emails, PDA updates, newsletters. But then he saw it, a thread titled Dinner Plans. Michael opened it, his breath catching as he read the messages. Rachel, can't wait for tomorrow night. Same place as last time? Daniel, you got it. I'll grab us a table. Don't be late. Michael stared at the screen, the words blurring as rage and heartbreak collided within him. There was no mistaking the tone, no excusing what he was reading. Michael wanted to storm into the bathroom and confront Rachel right then and there. He wanted to demand answers, to throw the evidence in her face and make her admit what she'd done. But as he stood there, his fists clenched, he hesitated. What if she denied it? What if she spun some story to explain it away? Without undeniable proof, she might wiggle out of it, and Michael couldn't risk that. He needed something irrefutable. He closed the laptop and returned it to its original position, his mind racing. He needed a plan. The next morning, Michael made a decision. He contacted a private investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Linda who came highly recommended by a coworker. Over coffee in a discreet downtown cafe, Michael laid everything out: the napkin, the emails, the late nights, the scene in the parking lot. I need the truth, he said, his voice heavy with desperation. Whatever it is, I just need to know. Linda nodded, her gaze steady. I'll handle it. Give me a week. True to her word, Linda delivered. A week later, Michael sat in his truck outside her office, flipping through the folder of evidence she'd compiled. The photos were damning: Rachel and Daniel meeting at a secluded cafe, walking into his house together, and even kissing in a dimly lit corner of a bar. Michael's hands shook as he stared at the images, his stomach churning. The betrayal was real, undeniable. And now, it was time to act. Michael stared at the photos spread across the kitchen table, his heart pounding with a mix of rage and sorrow. The evidence left no room for doubt: Rachel had betrayed him. The woman he'd trusted with his life and his son's future had thrown it all away for some affair with Noah's teacher. He wanted to scream, to cry, to throw the pictures in her face. But instead, he sat in silence, formulating a plan. This wasn't just about his pain anymore. It was about justice, about ensuring that Rachel faced the consequences of her actions. That evening, when Rachel came home, Michael was waiting in the living room. He heard the jingle of her keys and the soft shuffle of her shoes as she stepped inside. Hey, she called, her voice light. Sorry I'm late. The PTA meeting ran long again. Michael didn't respond. He waited, his fists clenched, until she walked into the room. When she saw him sitting there, the folder of evidence in his lap, her smile faltered. What's this? She asked, her voice cautious. Michael's eyes bored into hers. Sit down. Rachel hesitated, then lowered herself into the armchair across from him. Michael, what's going on? He opened the folder and slid it across the coffee table. You tell me. Rachel's eyes widened as she looked at the photos. Her hands trembled as she flipped through them, her face growing pale. I can explain. Explain what? Michael snapped, his voice rising. Explain why you've been sneaking around behind my back. Why you've been meeting him at cafes, going to his house, lying to me and Noah. Tears welled in Rachel's eyes. Michael, it's not what you think. Stop lying. Michael roared, slamming his fist on the table. I have a private investigator's report. I've seen the emails, the photos. Don't insult me by pretending this isn't exactly what it looks like. Rachel's tears spilled over, and she buried her face in her hands. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I never meant for it to happen. It was a mistake, a horrible, stupid mistake. Michael laughed bitterly, the sound cold and sharp. A mistake? That's what you call months of sneaking around, lying to my face, and bringing some man into our lives? You didn't just betray me, Rachel. You betrayed Noah. You betrayed this family. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, she whispered. I was lonely, Michael. You've been so distant lately, so focused on work. I felt invisible. Michael's jaw tightened. So your solution was to cheat? To destroy everything we built because you felt neglected? Do you have any idea what you've done? Rachel looked up at him, her face streaked with tears. Please, Michael. Don't do this. Let me fix it. Let me make it right. There's no fixing this, Michael said, his voice cold. You've made your choice. Now you'll live with the consequences. Planning the perfect payback. Michael wasn't satisfied with just exposing Rachel's affair and filing for divorce. What she had done wasn't just a betrayal, it was an assault on everything he had worked for, everything he held sacred. He wanted her to feel the pain she had caused, and not just through legal consequences. He wanted her to experience the deep, lasting sting of regret. Michael's revenge would be layered. It wasn't just about humiliating Rachel, it was about dismantling the life she had so recklessly jeopardized. Hitting her where it hurts. Her reputation at work. Michael knew Rachel's teaching career was her pride and joy. She loved being seen as a dedicated, talented educator who inspired students with her passion for art. To the outside world, she was an icon of respectability. Michael was determined to tear that image down. Using the evidence from the private investigator, Michael made sure her affair with Daniel became public knowledge at the school. He didn't stop at sharing the photos and emails with the superintendent. He anonymously tipped off a local journalist who wrote a scathing article about the scandal, framing it as a breach of trust by two educators. The article spread quickly in their small town, drawing sharp criticism from parents and colleagues. Rachel was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. Her co-workers began to shun her, and the parents who had once sung her praises now questioned her ability to be a role model for their children. Her social circle. Rachel had always taken pride in being part of Brookdale's PTA and social circles. Michael targeted this next. He shared the evidence of the affair discreetly with a few key PTA members, knowing how quickly word would spread. Within days, Rachel's friends stopped answering her calls and messages. Invitations to book clubs and weekend brunches dried up. Even Emily, her best friend, distanced herself. The social ostracization was swift and brutal, leaving Rachel isolated and humiliated. Financial ruin. Michael was methodical about ensuring Rachel paid financially for her betrayal. The divorce settlement, armed with overwhelming evidence of Rachel's infidelity, Michael's lawyer ensured that he received the lion's share of their marital assets. The house remained his, along with full custody of Noah. Rachel was left with a small savings account and her dwindling income from the part-time work she picked up after losing her teaching job. The mortgage trap. Michael knew that Rachel had co-signed a personal loan for a renovation project they'd started the previous year. With the divorce finalized, Rachel was still responsible for half of the repayment. Michael refinanced the loan in a way that increased her financial burden, making it nearly impossible for her to cover her share without drastically altering her lifestyle. Emotional devastation. Rachel's connection with Noah was Michael's final target. He didn't poison their relationship directly, he refused to stoop to manipulation. Instead, he let her actions speak for themselves. Michael gently but honestly explained to Noah why Rachel had moved out and why things had changed. "Your mom made some choices that hurt our family," he told his son one evening. "It's not your fault, and we both still love you. But things are going to be different now." Noah's trust in Rachel wavered as he pieced things together. During her visitation days, he was quiet and distant, often asking to come home early. Rachel, already burdened by guilt and regret, saw her bond with her son slipping away. Michael didn't shield her from this reality. On more than one occasion, he allowed Rachel to see Noah clinging to him after drop-offs or hear his hesitant tone when she called. It was a quiet but devastating reminder of what she had lost. Rachel's downfall. By the time Michael's revenge was complete, Rachel's life was in ruins. Professionally, Rachel was forced to resign from her teaching position, unable to withstand the scrutiny and backlash. She picked up a part-time retail job to make ends meet, far from the fulfilling career she had once cherished. Socially, Rachel's former friends had abandoned her. She spent her weekends alone in a small, shabby apartment on the outskirts of town, far from the bustling social life she'd once enjoyed. Financially, struggling to make loan payments and cover rent, Rachel sold most of her possessions. The luxury she had once taken for granted was gone, replaced by a stark reality she couldn't escape. Emotionally, the weight of her betrayal crushed Rachel. She spent countless nights crying, haunted by what she had thrown away. Her relationship with Noah remained strained, and every interaction with him reminded her of the family she had destroyed. Michael's triumph. Michael, on the other hand, thrived. He poured himself into his work, earning a promotion that allowed him to provide a comfortable life for Noah. He reconnected with friends he'd neglected during his marriage and even began dating again, taking things slow but allowing himself to feel hopeful about the future. When people in town asked about Rachel, Michael would offer a polite but firm response: "We're no longer together. She made her choices, and I'm focusing on what's best for me and Noah." Rachel's last plea. Months later, Rachel showed up unannounced at Michael's doorstep, her face pale and drawn. "Michael," she began, her voice trembling. I know I've done terrible things. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I miss you. I miss Noah. I'll do anything to fix this." Michael stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, with quiet finality, he said, "Some things can't be fixed, Rachel. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it." He closed the door, leaving Rachel standing alone on the porch, tears streaming down her face. Rachel's life became a cautionary tale in Brookdale, a stark reminder of how one reckless decision could unravel everything. Meanwhile, Michael moved forward, stronger and wiser, determined to give Noah the stable and loving life he deserved.